All right, this is chapter 7. We are moving on to the second part of this semester. Total 12 chapters. We're in chapter 7. I'll finish 6 chapters already. All right, here, just be prepared that we're going to do certain math in here. The math we're covering are not so difficult as long as you understand the concepts and the relationship between certain costs, profit, and volumes, then you'll find it's pretty simple and easy to do. Just follow the procedures. You'll be able to solve the problem in a pretty easy way. So object number 1, to calculate a unit contribution margin and a contribution margin ratio. So first, to get back to the first one, a unit contribution margin. It's in chapter 6. Contribution margin is to, there are two concepts here. One's contribution margin, another one's unit contribution margin. Contribution margin is to use the revenue minus the variable costs, and then we get contribution margin. And if we use the contribution margin and take the fixed cost away, that's the operating income. So for the unit 1, and we'll put a unit here, and then basically we're looking for per unit contribution margin. So it will be, there are two ways to calculate. One is to use the revenue minus the variable cost divided by total units. Another one is to unit sales. So how much you have sold average for each unit minus the variable cost per unit, then we also get a unit contribution margin. And the ratio, it's easy, and we're going to use the contribution margin to calculate that ratio. So we're going to get to that. The three things in this chapter, center part in this chapter, is the cost, volume, and a profit. So we're going to put all these three together. We're going to do some analysis to see what we can get from here to help the managers to make decisions. So this is a powerful tool that helps managers to make important business decisions. There's a relationship among cost, volume, and a profit or loss. Okay, if it's positive, it's profit. If it's negative, it's loss. And to determine how much the company must sell each month just to cover costs or break even. So break even is the one we're going to spend time on, not too much time, just to see how do we find a break even point. This analysis also help managers to determine the sales volume needed to earn a target profit. So if you have a target profit, you need to see how much do we need to make sales, okay, so that we can meet this target. The profit we talk about here is the operating profit. All right. So components of CVP analysis, basically CVP. It's a cost, volume, and a profit are the main components. And also we're going to look at some important components we have here, so 5 of them. Sales price per unit, so how much do you sell per unit? That's the unit sales. And a volume sold, so this is a volume. And this is revenue minus the variable cost per unit and all variable costs. And it's a similar thing. So almost the same thing, but it's very similar because it's a variable cost is a total of the total all the units have sold, you have made. Actually, in here is for the sales, or if it's per unit and divided by the total number of the volumes. So it's very much proportion. It's related in that way. Fixed costs we have talked about. Profit and loss is to use sales without per unit. Sales minus a variable cost minus fixed cost, that's a profit or loss. And the only thing different here is we'll put a per unit here. Again, as I said, sales or sales price per unit, it's basically the same idea. Only difference is if it's a sales, it's a total of all the units sold. If it's per unit, for each single unit, how much average we have for per unit of sales. And the same thing for the variable costs. So there's some 5 assumptions. These are important assumptions. And one, no volume discounts. So we are not going to have any discounts to consider. And if we have discounts, and we're going to adjust our analysis. Costs are linear through the relevant range. Relevant range is where you study, you get a scope. So we're looking at, okay, for certain amount and how much cost. So means, okay, number 2 here is basically saying, it doesn't say the fixed cost or variable cost. If it's a variable cost, so per unit cost is a constant. And anyway, if it's a fixed cost, fixed cost will never be constant. But this one, costs are linear through relevant range. It says, okay, it's a constant variable cost. Revenues are linear in relevant range. So means sales price is a constant. So within a certain range. So that's a 50,000 units or 1 million units or so. Inventory levels will not change. So you're going to have a constant inventory level, and the sales mix will not change either. So if sales mix is the product mix, so you have 3 products, for example, A, B, C. So 10% for A, 50% for B, and 40% for C. And when you do analysis, you want to make sure the sales mix is always the same, so that you can do comparison. So this is these are the 5 assumptions. And sometimes you say, okay, so what about 11%, but not 10% for part A, and 45% for part B, and remaining will be part C. So those are not so significant difference. So we'll consider this will be the same sales mix. So it's not so rigorous, rigid. See, it must be 10%, it must be 50%, it must be 40%. So depends on what mix you have, and there'll be some variations. CVP example facts, Case Poster. So Case Poster is a company name we're looking at. This is from the book. So here's the scenario we have. K has an e-tail, it's online sales poster business. She currently sells each poster for $35. So it's a sales price. Well, each poster has a variable cost of $21. It's unit variable cost. K has a fixed cost of $7,000. So this is total fixed cost. So K is currently selling 550 posters. Okay, this is a scenario. So we're going to find a contribution margin in the income statement. So contribution margin income statement is in chapter 6. I didn't do very much details in the presentation here, but it's very detailed in the textbook. So you may want to go back to chapter 6 to see what a contribution margin income statement is. But I'm going to do some review here. So we are going to calculate the total sales revenue. So total sales revenue is $35 times 550. So remember here. So this is a $35 per poster, and she has sold 550 of those. So total sales will be 550 times 35. So we'll get this number, 19,250. That's our total sales revenue. And to find the contribution margin is to use sales revenue minus total variable cost. So total variable cost will be 11,550. How do you get that? So it comes from here. So variable cost, each unit variable cost will be 21 times 550. You can do easy calculation. It will be 11,550. So this is 11,550. So sales revenue minus this, we're going to get contribution margin. Contribution margin will be 19,250 minus 11,550. So we get a 7,700. So next line will be the fixed cost. So if we use a contribution margin minus fixed cost, we're going to get the operating income. So let's do here. So 7,000, this is a given number, a fixed expense, fixed cost, and then we get operating income of $700. So this is the contribution margin income statement. This one is not for public use, it's only for internal use. So sales minus variable expense, we get contribution margin, minus fixed expenses, and we get operating income. It's a similar idea as we have in the income statement for public use. So revenue minus cost minus all expenses will get all the income. So unit contribution margin is per unit. So sales price per unit 35 minus variable cost per unit 21. So we get contribution margin per unit $14. So now assume the sales is 650. So we just changed that. So contribution margin is 650 times $14. This is $14. 9,000 minus $100. $9,100 minus 700. 7,000, it will be $2,100. It's operating income. So very straightforward. All right. And also congratulations, we are halfway actually. These are the very important concept we want to know about. It's a unit contribution margin here. Okay, let's go on. So next one is to find out the contribution ratio. Contribution margin ratio is to use, actually there are two ways to do that. We're going to get the same number. One is to use the contribution margin per unit divided by sales price per unit. It will be 14 divided by 35. It will be $40. Another one is to simply use contribution margin divided by sales revenue. We'll also get 40% because it's pretty simple, and we can find out the way to find out. The way to do this is, okay, let me draw, let's put here. Contribution margin, and how do we do this? So here, let's do here. Contribution margin here is equals to actually I draw the wrong one. Should be a contribution unit here. Sorry, a contribution unit equals to it's not easy to do. So equals to contribution margin. Oops, it's not easy. Margin. Go here. Divide by volume. And divide by sales price per unit. So we draw a line here. Divide by sales price per unit is sales divided by unit. Sales divided by the volume. So sales divided by volume. So this is a contribution margin divided by volume is the contribution margin per unit. Sales divided by volume is the sales price per unit. So both of these are divided by the same value. So what we can do is simply cross that out. So cross that out. When we cross this out, we suddenly get contribution margin divided by sales, contribution margin divided by sales revenue. So these two are basically the same thing. It's only difference is how do we, what number do we use? So if we get the per unit number, then we just use the per unit number. If we don't have the per unit number, we simply use the contribution margin divided by the sales revenue. All right. So here's an example. Again, it's a very simple example. Crystal Cruise Line offers nightly dinner cruise off the coast of Miami, San Francisco, and Seattle, and so on. Dinner cruise tickets sell for $50. For $50 here. Oops. Per passenger. The variable cost providing the dinner is $20 per passenger. So you have the pay for the company needs to pay $20 for the variable cost, and a fixed cost of operating the vessel. So you have to make it run. Depreciation, salary, docking fees, and other expenses is $210,000 per month. The company's relevant range extends to 14,000 monthly passengers. So relevant range here is the number of passengers relevant to the calculation we are using here. So it's up to 14,000 monthly passengers. So here are the numbers we have. So now use the information above. We're going to do this for. What is contribution margin per passenger? So we have 50 as the revenue per passenger and 20 as the variable cost per passenger. So for this one, simple and easy, and we're going to have this as 30. Oops, let's see, there's a 50 here. 50 minus 20 equals to 30. So this is for A. Okay, sorry, the 50 is not so so good. Let's do a little bit here. So 50 minus 20 is 30. And the next one is what is the contribution margin ratio? So contribution margin ratio is to use the contribution margin divided by the sales. So we have 30 divided by 50. So it would be 30 divided by 50. That equals to 60%. So this is contribution margin. Use the unit contribution margin to project operating income if monthly sales total is 11,000 passengers. We have fixed cost here. So we're going to use 11,000 passengers times 50 minus 210,000. So we'll get a number. So I'm not going to do the calculation on this one. It's pretty easy. Next slide, actually I think we'll have that. Use contribution ratio to project operating income if monthly sales revenue totals $490,000. So let's see, we'll use contribution ratio to project. We're going to look for the bottom line. So remember, to do this, we're going to use the total sales minus the variable cost. That it will be the margin, contribution margin minus fixed cost. So here, contribution margin divided by sales equals to 60%. So we're looking for this one. So we'll simply use a 490 times 6% minus $210,000. Then we get to that number. So we should see on the next slide here. So 50 minus 20 is 30 for A. We had that already. B is you get a 60. Remember, we get a 60. And a C, let's see, what do we get here? Oh, it's not here anymore. Do we do the calculation here? I don't think we did. So basically, the same idea is to we got the units projected income sales if monthly total is this one. We're going to look for the operating income. So we look for the total. This is a 30 is unit contribution margin, and times 11,000 it will be a contribution margin minus fixed cost. That's our operating income, $120,000. So D is to use the contribution margin ratio to project. Remember, it was a 490,000 times 60%, as we said before, minus the fixed cost will be $84,000. So these are very simple calculation. See if you understand all this. If you do, great. We're halfway. A little recap here. We are looking at several things. One is to find a contribution margin or unit per contribution margin. Basically the same thing. Contribution margin divided by total volume will be unit contribution margin. So the relationship here is the sales minus variable cost equals to contribution margin, or you put it per unit. If you want to use per unit, you have to use per unit for each one. And then we have the contribution margin minus fixed costs. Then we get to the operating income. So because fixed cost is fixed expense or fixed cost is the same thing, it's always a lump sum number. So usually you need to try to find out contribution margin, but not unit contribution margin for this line. Minus this, then you get operating income. Okay, so you're going to use a total sales times 14. This is a contribution margin per unit. Then you get contribution margin here, and then you get to the next step. So basic idea is here. All right, you want to find a contribution margin here. You see sales revenue minus variable cost will be contribution margin. This is a per unit margin here, and the ratio is to use contribution margin divided by sales, and you get 60%. So these are the unit ones. So this is per unit, and you get to this. If you don't have the per unit values, the contribution margin divided by sales revenue is also going to get you 60%. That's what I did before. In the previous slides, we talked about how they are the same thing. And then basically, you know the relationship between all these terms, and you get two numbers. You can find a third one. So use the unit contribution margin to project operating income. So unit contribution margin can give us to the contribution margin, because you can simply use this one times total units minus fixed cost. Then you get to this one. Okay. Here's another example of the relationship between them, and the contribution margin minus fixed cost get operating income. And also here's the relationship between contribution margin and the ratio. So I use a contribution margin equals to sales times the ratio, then you get the contribution margin. So it's very straightforward. So this is another example. Same idea, same thing in here. 7.2 is to project change in income. So use the information from the data set. If the company sells an additional 600 tickets, by what amount will this operating income increase? So how much does it increase in operating income? No matter how much they have, so they simply increase 600 tickets, and doesn't matter how many they sell. Actually, they sell 14. So actually, that doesn't really matter too much. But anyway, that can be done fairly simple. So contribution margin per unit times additional ticket is 600 tickets times $30 is $18,000. So add up when we have this additional and fixed cost doesn't change, and then if you increase in contribution margin, and it's going to directly increase into our operating income. So 600 tickets is simply the pure profit we have added because the fixed cost has been taken into account already. So it's a very simple calculation, but it requires you to understand the relationship between the sales, the variable cost, the contribution margin, and the fixed assets and operating income. So if you know all these and know all the relationship between them, you're good to go. So next objective is to use CVP, cost volume price analysis to find break-even points. So here, break-even points is what we want to see. We want to use and a target profit volume. So if we know how to do the break-even points, and target profit volume will be very simple. OP stands for profit, not price. Sorry. So break-even point. Sales level at which operating income is 0. Okay. So revenue minus variable cost, that equals to marginal contribution margin, and then minus fixed cost. If we put the bottom line is 0, and then we can find out how much sales we want to make, and that is the break-even point. If sales is above break-even point, and then we have a profit. If it's lower, and then we have loss. So that's basically meaning that means fixed expense equals to total contribution margin, and our total sales equals to total expense. Why? And let's do it here. And fixed. Let's get a pen here. So remember, we have a sales minus the variable cost or variable expenses. That will be a contribution margin. So we have a CM. Then CM minus fixed. That equals to operating income. Right, operating income. So contribution margin minus fixed expenses to operating income. Now, because we are looking for a break-even, means okay, this equals to 0. So that means contribution margin minus fixed expenses is 0. That means operating fixed expenses should equal to total contribution margin. That's how we get to this point. And total sales equals to total expense. Okay, let's remove that so we can find this out. Total sales equal to total expense. Total expense is the variable cost, variable expense plus the fixed cost, fixed expenses. So if the sales equals to all the expenses, then we get to the zero, because sales minus variable cost minus fixed cost equals to zero. That means total sales equals to total expenses, right? So this is simple math. So now we're going to use unit contribution margin to calculate break-even point in units. So unit sold equals to fixed expense plus operating income divided contribution margin per unit. Okay, how do we get to this one here? So we're looking for the units sold, how many units have been sold, and then we are going to find out, how do we find that out? And units sold is the same as the volume. So volume times contribution margin per unit is going to get contribution margin. Contribution margin equals to fixed expenses plus operating income, or contribution margin minus fixed expenses equals to operating income. So basically, this is how we change the place, so that we can find out all this. You can simply replace this unit sold as the volume V. So volume equals to fixed expenses plus operating income divided by contribution margin per unit. Or you can just both sides times contribution margin per unit, and so units, the volume times contribution margin per unit, that gets us to contribution margin. Contribution margin equals to fixed expenses plus operating income. So that's basically where we came from. So this the formula to find a unit sold. So as long as we know fixed expenses, we know operating income, we know contribution margin per unit, then we can find out the information for total volume. So the one we have here, do we have a number? Let's see. We're looking for, there's a question here. Using, okay. So here, okay. $14 was what we have calculated, 35 minus 21, and the fixed cost will be 7,000. Break-even point is when operating income is 0. So 7,000 plus 0 divided by 14, and we get a number 500 posters. So basically 500 posters in our case here is the break-even units. So break-even point for units. That means if K sells 500 posters for the month, and she's not going to lose a penny, but also she's not going to make any penny either. So this is break-even point. Now we can use a break-even point. Sorry, I'll use the contribution margin to calculate break-even point and sales in dollars. The formula we're using here, the formula we're using here is the fixed expenses plus operating income divided by contribution margin ratio, then we get the total sales. You can find out how we get to this formula here. And if you use contribution margin times total sales, what do we get? And we're going to get to what is it? Sales times contribution ratio. Actually, we get a contribution margin here. So contribution margin equals to fixed expense plus the operating income. That's how we do the calculation. So this is a very simple variation of the equation we just mentioned. So here again, with a 7,000 fixed cost plus 0, that's a great break-even point, means okay, operating income is 0, divide by the contribution margin is 40%, and then we get to the point. It's a $17,500 of the sales. So that's how we find out the information. Okay, or you can do this one. So 500 posters, and then we're going to sell. That's a break-even point. So 700 posters, how much do we sell per unit? It's a 35. So 35 times 500 is also going to get us to this number. It's the same idea, different approach, same idea. So finding volume needed for target profit using unit contribution margin. So assume K wants to earn an operating income of $4,900. So we have now we set operating income as $4,900, not zero anymore. So that's how K wants to make for the month. And again, if we know the unit contribution margin, and still as sales minus variable cost equals to contribution margin, if it all units, contribution margin, and then we minus the fixed cost, then we get to the operating income. So now to the bottom here is the operating income is $4,900, and then we use $4,900 plus the fixed assets, so fixed costs, then we get contribution, and use contribution, then we can go find out the sales. Okay, so or now we're only looking for the volume, and you can use the contribution, and then you can find out the volume using contribution, because volume, the contribution margin divided by the contribution ratio, not contribution ratio, let's see, divided by unit contribution margin, and then we get to the unit. So that's basically what we do. So 7,000 plus 4,900 divided by 14. That's how we get to that. And so we put it all together. There's a formula here. Units to be sold equals to fixed expense plus operating income divided by contribution margin per unit. And here we get to this one. Okay, so that's 850. So K needs to sell 850 posters for a month, so that she can make $4,900. So total sales will be this one, 850 times 35, that equals to $29,750 total sales to achieve target profit. Finding volume needed for target profit using, so we are going to, is that the same thing? Volume needed for target profit. Oh, using, what do we, oh, we use a CM, now is a CM ratio. So using CM ratio to find a target volume, so it'll be here, sales dollar needed equals to fixed expense plus target operating income divided by contribution margin ratio. So same idea. It's very similar to the one we just talked about. The only thing difference is only we're going to use the ratio, contribution margin to do the calculation. So see here. So 7,000 plus 4,900, same thing. But we're dividing 0.40, then we get to the 129,750. So if we get to the previous one, so still get to this one, but we're dividing this by 14. So, and then we use this total times 35. It's basically, it's this one divided by, this will be replaced by 14 divided by 35. This is 0.4. So it's the same idea. Okay, so we get to the same point. Here is to find a break-even point. So it's the same numbers we have used just to find a break-even point. And the one we use here is simply we'll say, okay, we're going to get a 0 operating income, and then we're going to find a break-even point. Units to be sold equals to fixed expenses plus operating income divided contribution margin per unit, and then we get to this. Again, you do not need to remember all these formulas at all. But remembering this will help you to solve problem in an easier way. But I do recommend that you do not remember this, these ones. Try to figure out how we get to this number with the understanding of the whole process, but not the formula itself. Because remembering a formula will be pretty confusing, and you may forget formula very easily. But if you understand how you get to these numbers, and that'll be very easy to find out. So let's see here. Use information above to find a break-even point. So what is break-even point? Break-even point is when you have operating income as 0. So if you're thinking, again, follow my cursor here. So I'll just write it down here, even though it's not so easy to write. And so I'll use a short form to that. That's the sales minus variable expenses equals to CM, oops, too big, minus, let's see, fixed equals to operating income, right? So if this one is 0, and what we have, going to find a break-even point. So what we have is we're going to see how many sales we want to make in units. So and now we know our variable cost, and we know our fixed costs. So all these costs we have known already. Also, we know how much per unit is here. So basically, you have 0 here. You can find out contribution margin by making contribution margin equals to fixed cost. So fixed cost is 210,000, and then you have sales equals to sales minus variable expenses. So variable cost will be CM. So total sales will be the CM plus the variable cost. Or another way, the sales equals to all the expenses. So the V plus F, so variable cost plus fixed cost, will equals to sales here. So here is our fixed cost, 210,000, and the variable cost will be 20 times some units. So actually we don't have it, so we need to see how much unit we have. And the sales is the 50 times some units. So units will be X. So we're going to have a S. So 50X equals to 20X plus F. So F is this one. So only variable we do not know is the X, total units. So we do here, we can extract the X out. Actually, it's going to get to this one. So the calculation is easy. Just plug the numbers in, and you can we can get to this one. Operating income is 0 anyway. So we get to 7,000 passengers is break even for our case. And this one is to find out an alternative way to find out as long as we have CM ratio is 30 divided by 50, so 60%. So we find this very easily because the CM is 50 minus 20 and plus the total sales per unit, so we got 0.6, and then we can use the same idea to find out the total sales revenue. So graphing the CVP relationship, which is sales volume, it's units time price, and then we plot points for total sales revenue and draw a sales revenue line from a region through the plotted point. So it's here, and here we have a 1,000 units, and I added $10 per each. I believe this one. So get 1 point here, and then simply draw a line. And now, when we have the line, if you want to find out the other things, you can simply see if we have the units, we can find out the total here. Again, it's very simple to find out. And so we can draw a fixed cost line, and fixed cost lines are 4,000. So where do you get these numbers from? Actually, this number's from nowhere. It's from the book, so we just simply use these numbers. So 4,000 is fixed cost, so we just draw a line fixed cost here. So 2 different color lines. And then we find the total cost. So total cost will be, so it's 0, it gets down here. Let's see here. You're going to calculate it anyway. We don't have the calculation here, but simply find out 2 points. The first point is often from this one. When the volume is 0, we have a fixed cost this one, and the total cost will be at this point. And then we find another one anywhere, and it just link these 2 points, and we got a line. This is our total cost line. Okay. And the point where the total cost line and the sales line intersects, this is our break-even point. So if the volume goes up to the right, this is our profit. This goes down here, this is our loss. So if it's this side, it's operating loss. If it's this side, it's operating income, and this one is a 0, and it's break-even point. So okay. So next one is about performing sensitivity analysis in response to changing business conditions. Sensitivity analysis is when something changes, how sensitive the other variables change. So let's take a look. Sensitivity analysis, managers need to be prepared for increasing costs, pricing pressure from competitors, and other changing business conditions. So sensitivity analysis is, okay, if we increase cost, and what will happen to our contribution margin? What happens to our operating income? If price changes because pressure from competitors and many other things may change, and so if the price changes, what will be the effect on our the total bottom line? So that's basically sensitivity analysis. Managers can use CVP analysis to conduct sensitivity analysis. Again, it's kind of what-if analysis. What if this changes? What if we increase 10%? What if we decrease 10%? What if this? What if that? So you're going to find the other things fairly easily. Usually we use the Excel sheet to find this information. So what if the sales price change? What if the cost change? What if the sales mix change? So, oops. If the sales price change, contribution margin will change. Break-even point also will change. Depends on which direction. It's always the same direction for the contribution margin. So the higher the price, the higher the margin, if the other things don't change. And remember, when you are doing analysis, sensitivity analysis, and you always want to have only one variable change so that you can see the effect on the others. If two things change, it'll be sometimes so difficult to identify the changes on other variables. But it's not always true, because if the variables cost change and the fixed cost change, and if the price doesn't change, and so your operating income will change. Just fairly easy to find a change to the operating income. So what if variable cost change? Contribution margin changes, and so revenue minus variable cost or variable expense is contribution margin. So if variable cost changes in a contribution, for sure it's going to change. So they're going to change in opposite direction. So variable cost increases, our contribution margin is going to decrease, and if the variable cost decreases, our contribution margin is going to increase. Break-even point will also change. So the operating income gets set to 0, and so that means sales equals to total expenses, variable expense plus the cost expenses, the fixed expenses. So if the variable cost increases and the fixed expenses doesn't change, that means your sales will have to change. So break-even point is going to move up. So if fixed cost changes, fixed cost change is after contribution margin has been calculated, because its contribution margin will be revenue minus variable cost. So it doesn't have anything to do with the fixed costs. So contribution margin is not going to change, but it's going to change break-even point. Again, break-even point is for the sales. What is the sales when the operating income is 0? So sales equals to the fixed cost plus the variable cost. So if fixed cost changes, and the total sales must change too. So break-even point is going to move up. Sustainability, and every chapter will talk about sustainability, and it's basically the same thing. Reducing costs and helping the environment, and in many different ways, mainly for sustainability, social responsibilities, and so we decrease use of the plastic in bottle, reduces variable costs. Decreasing variable costs makes it easier to reach target profit. So object number 4, find break-even and target profit volume for multiple product companies. This is get a little bit complicated, but it's exactly same idea. Its only difference is we're applying from one product into multiple products. So this is from an exhibit from the book, and again, I'm not going to go through this. So they have different posters, and then your sales will be 2 different posters, and then you're going to have a variable cost per unit differently. You're going to have a contribution margin of each one that is different, and then you're going to have a this one's sales mix. Let's see. Per unit. Okay, sales mix here. Number of units is basket, so 5 and a 3. So if it's basket, it'll be 5 regular ones and 3 other ones, and so you're going to have a contribution margin of each one differently, and they can have a total. And the basket is a hypothetical, so you're going to say, okay, every time sales we're going to sell 8 or something like that, so 5 out of 8 is the regular ones, and 3 out of 8 is a large poster, and so we can calculate contribution margin for each one, and then we get a total in the basket here. And the weighted average contribution margin per unit will be 160 divided by 8, so it'll be $20 per unit. So this unit is not this, it's not this, it's the average. So break even in sales revenue multi-product from the example here. And the same idea we have is fixed expense plus operating income is 0. Divide by, this is the weighted average contribution margin per unit. So we have 20, so 350 posters. So this is a mix of large and regular ones. So this 5 out of 8 is the regular, 3 out of 8 is the large, so total of those will be 350 posters, so that we can make the break-even point. So 5 out of 8, so we're going to have 219 of regular posters and 131 or 32, should be, because we don't have the quarter poster, so that'll be a break-even point for us to make the sales. So it's run up, so it's always run up, even it's 22.25, you always want to run up. Okay, here's the example, and again, so they get different numbers for different crews, and they have a different price, and 50 is for the regular ones, and 130 is for the executive crews. So for dinner, it's $20 for the regular and $40. So they eat better. Probably they eat lobsters on something. So it's more expensive for the executive, and maybe some alcohol, wine or something. So it's more expensive. And then we can use these ones to calculate what we're looking for. Assuming this is higher, is it higher or lower than simple average, contribution margin, Y, and so on? Okay. Assuming I expect to sell 4 regular crews for every executive cruise, and compute the weighted average contribution margin per unit. So here, so 4 regular for every executive, so 1 and a 4. So I'm going to use a 4 as the number units, and 1 as a unit, and you can find out total sales and so on, and the total will be 5 here, and you can do the calculation on the contribution margin, and then you can get a total of the contribution margin, and then you can get a weighted average using 210 divided by 5, so it'll be 20. So 20.5. Oh no, let's divide. That's units. Okay, 42. Sorry, it's 42. 221 divided by 5 is 42. So 42 will be the average the average unit contribution margin. So and so continue on that is to refer to the answer. So 42, compute the total number of dinner crews that the company must sell to break even. And again, we can use the idea to do the calculation. And again, the same idea to find this formula, and we use this formula, or if you don't use formula, just go step by step and find a break even, as total passengers should be 5,000. And out of this, 4,000 is the regular cruise, and 1,000 is for executive cruise. Okay. Again, so there are some more calculations, and we're not going to do in here because it's a very similar to the ones we have done. Only thing you want to do is to make them calculate the average contribution margin per unit, and then find out break-even point or something like that. So object number 5 is to determine a firm's margin of safety, operating leverage, and the most profitable cost structure. Again, cost structure here is to find out product mix, for example, and also find out how variable cost is going to affect how you're going to reduce the variable cost, for example, here. Margin of safety, the excess of expected sales over break-even sales. You want to avoid that. So it's called expected sales. So you don't want to expect too much if you cannot make it. Operating leverage, the relative amount of fixed and variable costs that make up the company's total costs. So you're going to take a look at those. Excess of actual or expected sales over break-even sales. Dropping sales that the company can absorb before incurring a loss. Do we have more explanation here? Used to evaluate the risk of current operating as well as the risk of new. Okay, let's use an example to explain that. Margin for safety units and sales dollars example. Margin of safety units, expected sales is 950, and a break-even point is 500 units. So now we have a margin of safety in units. So this is a margin of safety in dollars. So you can calculate the percentage of that. It's a margin in safety in units divided by the expected sales in units. It's a 47.4% rounded, and you're going to get a total sales as the same thing. So you're going to get the same percentage in here. So calculation is the same. Calculation is the same. So I'm not going to do that. So operating leverage factor, how responsive a company's operating income is to changing volume. The lowest possible value for this factor is 1 if the company has no fixed costs. So if they have more fixed costs, there will be less than 1. So leverage factor equals contribution margin divided by the operating income. If contribution margin minus the fixed cost is operating income, that means operating income is always less than the I correct that. So lowest is 1, so you're going to leverage factor is always 1 or above. Contribution margin is always greater or equal to operating income, because contribution margin we must use contribution margin to minus fixed expenses to get operating income. So only time contribution margin equals to operating income is when fixed cost is 0. So the most cases that's not 0. That means leverage is always greater than 0. So here's a 1 if it's a 0. But if it's not 0, and then we get to some smaller number in the operating income, then we'll get to 2.11, for example. This one is the operating leverage factor. So if we have a high operating leverage, high leverage of fixed costs and a lower levels of variable cost, that means, okay, we have too much fixed cost, for example, and a level of a variable cost is lower. And a high contribution margin ratio, so contribution is high. Contribution ratio is to use the contribution margin divided by the sales. So if the variable cost is lower, that means you're going to have a higher contribution margin. The higher contribution margin means the higher ratio. So this is how we get to this conclusion. And it's a higher risk. The high risk is you're going to have a higher fixed costs. You're going to have a lower lower operating income. So companies are facing higher risk because your profit margin is lower. It's a high potential for reward. Means you have improvements. You have a higher potential to improve and get a reward. Lower one is the other side. So you're going to have a low risk, then there will lower potential for improvement. So examples include merchandising companies. Merchandising companies is always having lower fixed operating costs, but they have a higher variable costs, and so their margins mainly very low. So yeah, actually their contribution margin is low, and so basically they have a pretty low risk, and it's merchandising, but their profit is also low. So this is example. So I'm not going to do the example here. Actually, this is our maybe what time is it? Oh, it's over an hour already. So this one is from the book S7-4. Compute and use operating leverage factor to find out Sally. Operating leverage here. Sally sells 1,500 posters. Use original data from S7-13 to compute her operating leverage factor. So we're going to find out operating leverage factor is to use the contribution margin divided by the operating income. So we're going to find out if the sales volume increased 20%, by what percentage will her operating income change? Prove your answer. So 13 is here. So here, contribution margin is 1,500 posters times $20 per poster is 30, and the fixed expense is 15,000. I think it's all given here. 15,000, and here is average sales price 45, and the average poster cost per poster is 25. So 45 minus 25 is 20. So it'll be our contribution margin will be 30,000. Fixed cost will be 1,500. So 15,000. So operating income is 15,000. So the leverage is 2. So it means if the volume increase 20%, operating income will increase 40%. So 2 here. The operating leverage factor is 2 multiplied 20 here. So 2 is the 1. Okay. So to prove that, original volume is posters of 15 plus additional increase, 20% increase is 30, and the new volume is 18. So if you put it together, it's new volume. Multiply unit contribution margin is $20, as we had there. New total contribution margin is here, and the fixed expense is the same. So our new operating income is 21,000, and now the operating income before change is 15, and the difference is 6,000, and the change here is a percentage of 6,000 divided by 15,000, and that is our 40%. So that's the proof. Anyway, this is not very difficult to understand, but our focus really is the first few objectives, and I put more emphasis on those. And our actual exam will mainly on the first part. And you also need to know how we are going to deal with multiple products, or to look at a product mix, and that's about a chapter. So read the chapter, try to understand the relationship between all these costs, profit, and also the sales, and then you'll find it's pretty easy to do the calculation without using the formula. Using formula sometimes is confusing, especially for this kind of calculations. So I personally do not recommend use the formula, but to understand the relationship between all these factors and do the calculation step by step. All right. But again, of course, if you want to use formula, I have no objection, and use that, but try to understand the formula itself before you use those. And that's about a chapter. I will see you tomorrow, and when we get to chapter number 8. Thank you very much.